as we recreate reality. I have a story for you, and it's called Her Story, the beginning of the universe. This is a massive poetic title. It suggests something much more intimate than just psychic and big bangs. It sounds like the story of a person who carries the weight or the light of everything that ever was. To get the tone right, should we treat this literally, waking up the void, or more metaphorically, like a child discovering the world for the first time? The beginning of the universe. She didn't wake up with a bang. It was more of a hum. The kind of sound a finger makes circling the rim of a crystal glass. Before her, there was no before. There was only the heavy dark, a thick velvet silence that didn't mind being empty. But she had an itch in her palm. She reached out, her fingers brushing against nothingness. And where she touched, the dark began to fray. And a new violet light began to take its place. A single spark, no bigger than a grain of sand, tumbled from her thumb. It didn't fall. There was no down, yet it simply hung there, pulsing with a rhythmic, frantic heat. She leaned in, her breath smelling of ozone and ancient static. And she whispered the first words ever spoken. The spark listened. The violet light listened. It was programmable. It was the World Wide Web. The spark listened, and then it grew. The architect of all. As the spark grew, she felt a sharp, sympathetic thrumming in her own chest. She realized then that the heat wasn't coming from the spark. It was echoing through her. She looked down at her hands, no longer seeing mere skin and bones, but a map of shifting nebulae. Her veins weren't carrying blood, but a rushing current of liquid starlight. Every breath she took expanded the horizon of the dark, pushing the walls of the nothing further back and replacing it with the violet light, the light of healing. She wasn't a gardener planting a field. She was a single vital cell in a body so vast it had no edges. I am the breath, she whispered, and as she did, a billion suns ignited in the distance, mimicking the fire of the synapses in her own mind. For she is the microcosm and the macrocosm at once. If she moved her arm, a galaxy swirled in her wake. If she felt a moment of cold, 1,000's world entered an ice age. She is the consciousness of the great body, the first spark of life in a cosmic anatomy that was finally after an eternity of sleep, beginning to wake up. The hum that had started at her fingertips didn't stay a hum for long. It traveled up her arms, through the starlight in her veins, and settled in the hollow of her throat until it became a vibration she could no longer contain. She opened her mouth and the song began. It wasn't a melody of notes as we know them, but a symphony of fundamental forces. This was the first movement. The bass, a deep tectonic throb that gave weight to the void, pulling the scattered dust into the first spears. The strings, a shimmer of high-frequency light that wove through the dark, stitching gravity to time. The rhythm, the steady percussive beat of her own heart, setting the pace for every orbit and every ticking sound. As she sang, the body she inhabited began to dance. This wasn't just a noise. It was a blueprinted harmony. Her voice hit a high, crystalline note. Ice formed on the rings of distant giants, where her voice dipped into a warm, resonant growl. Molten cores ignited in the bellies of new planets. She realized that she was the conductor of her own existence. The music didn't just fill the universe, it was the universe. Every atom was a vibrating string, held in place only because she refused to stop the song. If I fall silent, she realized, with a jolt of wonder, the stars will stop spinning. The song was no longer something she merely sang. It became something she became. As the melody swelled, her stillness broke. She began to move, and the vacuum of the void caught fire with the friction of her grace. It was the great choreography of the universe. With every arc of her arm, she dragged the music through the silence, spinning it into shimmering ribbons of physical laws. A sweep of her hand sent the heavy bass notes curling into spirals, gathering the stray dust of the dark into the first great galaxies. A sudden, sharp spin threw off sparks of high-pitched harmony that cooled into crust of planets, locking them into their rhythmic orbits. A leap stretched the very fabric of space-time, pulling the now into a tomorrow. She wasn't just dancing in the universe, she was weaving it. The music was the thread, and her body was the loom. As she twirled, the trailing edges of her song snagged on the nothingness, turning nowhere into somewhere. The faster she moved, the more complex the tapestry became. A flicker of her wrist created the delicate helix of a molecule. A stomp of her heel ignited the nuclear furnace of the sun. She was a cell, yes, but a cell in convulsion, a kinetic burst of energy that refused to be still. The great body she inhabited began to twitch and grow, fueled by the sheer momentum of her dance. She was the pulse in the artery, the signal in the nerve, the kinetic proof that to exist is to be in constant, beautiful motion. As her dance reached its peak, she starts to see the movement take on life of its own. The universe starts dancing back. She didn't just sing the song, she became the frequency. The distinction between the dancer and the dance finally dissolved. There was no longer a she who sang a universe that listened. The friction of her movement had polished the air until it turned into light, and the melody that became so dense that it crystallized into matter. Her heartbeat was no longer a private rhythm. It was the pulsar's throb in the deep crest of space. Her breath was no longer a gasp for air. It was the solar wind carving past through the nebulae. Every atom of her, the starlight in her veins and the gravity in her bones, vibrated at the exact pitch of the cosmos. She was the lyric and the mouth that spoke it, the string and the hand that plucked it. As she spun, her form began to blur into luminous, endless spirals. She stretched thin, her essence spreading thin across the light years, coating every newborn sun in a layer of its own consciousness. She felt the cold of the void and the heat of the stars simultaneously, a billion different sensations reporting back to her at once. She was the grand anatomy, and she is, and we all are. She realized that to be a cell in the body of the universe meant never to be lonely, for she was the very fabric of everything that would ever breathe, cry, or wonder. She was the fabric of life. She was the beginning. Yes, but she was also and is also the always. The stillness of the heavy dark was finally, irrevocably broken. As she became the song, a second resonance emerged from the shadow. Not an echo, but a counterpoint. The divine dissonance. He emerged not from nothing, but from the very silence she had pushed aside. Where she was, the expanding light, he was the deep gravity that gave it shape. Where she was the melody, he was the silence between the notes that made the music possible. They did not simply meet, they collided in a slow motion crash of celestial space. A slow motion crash of celestial grace. As they moved together, the cell that was her and the force that was him fused into a single binding geometry. This is divine union, the sacred, the friction of existence meeting the peace of the void. Their embrace was the first supernova, a heat so intense it forged elements that had no names yet. In the center of their interlocking dance, a new rhythm began to beat. It wasn't hers, it wasn't his. It was a third vibration, fragile, fierce, and utterly new. The birth of their child. From the core of their union, life was exhaled into the cosmos. The child wasn't a single being, but a shimmering gold-flecked consciousness that filled out across the galaxy they had woven. The child was the result, the green moss on a damp stone, the first cry of a lung-breathing creature, the curiosity of an eye looking back up at the stars, or the curiosity of eye looking into your eye. The mother provided the energy, the father provided the form, the child became the experience. The universe was no longer just a body, it was a family. Every star was a night light left on for the child, and every law of physics was a boundary set by the parents to keep the miracle from flying apart. The legacy of the song. The mother, the father, and the child did not retreat into a distant heaven because she became the song and he became the silence that holds it. They are woven into the very marrow of everything that exists. They left a secret written into the DNA of every star and the pulse of every human, that the universe was not built out of cold math, but out of an act of shared devotion, a balanced masculine and feminine, and a family that loved each other from the very core of their being. So every time you feel a surge of compassion for a stranger, or the quiet warmth of someone else's hand in yours, or even your own hand that you're holding, you are hearing a faint refrain of that first melody. Love is not just an emotion we stumble upon. It is the fundamental physics of our origin. It is the gravity that pulls us together when the world tries to push us apart. So I'd like us all together to have this intention. As you move through your day, remember, you are a vital cell in the same great body. You carry the spark of the mother's dance and the strength of the father's embrace. You are a child of the universe that chose to exist because it wanted someone to share the music with. May you walk with grace of that first dance, knowing that you are never alone. You are simply a note in a symphony that began with a heartbeat of pure, unconditional love. It has been a joy weaving this tapestry. Please leave me some feedback if you would like. I would appreciate it. The mirror effect. In this reality, the one we have woven together, the great song isn't something that happened once and then stopped. It is happening now, in the way you choose your next, and the way you hold your next thought, the way you choose your next word. So we're gonna weed our minds. Just as a cell must stay healthy for the body to thrive, we must be the stewards of our own consciousness. When thoughts of fear, judgment, or not enough sprout like weeds, we have the power to gently pluck them out. We choose to water the seeds of empathy instead. We have roots of remembrance. No matter how far we drift into the complexities of the modern world, our roots remain in the first spark, We come from love. We are made of music. When we return to that root, we remember that we are indigenous to this universe. We belong here. We're indigenous to the universe. The universe will thrive. This transformation isn't a distance maybe. It is a shift in frequency. By choosing actions that honor the planet, the animals, and each other, we literally retune the world. We recreate a reality where the child, the living experience of the all, has the space to bloom. Every being, from the smallest moss to the largest whale, from the person sitting next to you to the furthest star, has a seat at the table in the body of the universe. There are no extra parts. Everyone has a purpose. Everyone is home. In the beginning, she didn't just wake up with a bang. It was a hum. Thank you so much. And I'm here to look at the chat and see if anyone joined. This is my first time, so let's see. Well, anyways, thank you for joining. And it could be schizoid posting, schizo, possibly. It's just something that I cooked up today and I thought I wanted to share with y'all. Anyways, I love you. Keep on their highest self sticking out so that we can all change the world together. Bye now. See you next time.